Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Neeru Tandon, Department of English, VSSD College, Kanpur. We are discussing English language teaching. In this paper, the module on language testing and evaluation has been written by Dr. G.A. Ghanshyam. The objectives of this module are to develop an understanding of the principles and purposes underlying evaluation, become familiar with the variety of procedures to be used for an evaluation, be able to identify and use criteria for the evaluation of textbooks and materials, to understand the purposes and procedures of teacher evaluation. Now let us talk about the module. Learning conditions and learning outcomes are important concerns for teachers. The awareness of testing and evaluation helps the teacher in making informed decisions about the teaching methodologies to be implemented, judging the learner's progress and identifying the weaknesses. Testing and evaluation enables to have a better understanding of the progress or shortcoming of the teaching learning process and achievement of the intended learning outcome. Language testing and evaluation primarily focuses on the acquirement of the 4 basic skills known as LSRW. Before we proceed, let us consider one very important factor. We are discussing language testing and language evaluation. As such, acquisition of language is important, learning of language is of course desirable, but testing and evaluation, why and what for? Who needs this testing? Why this testing and why this evaluation process should be done? Who wants that? The learner, the teacher, the course coordinator, or the syllabus maker? Actually, testing this language, how much you have acquired this language, what's the speed of this acquisition, what are the pros and cons, what are the problems coming in the way of acquiring this language. This is the basic thing that we need, that language testing should be done. Evaluation should be done. Why? Because it has been introduced as a course. In most of the colleges and universities, it is the part of the curriculum. And when anything is the part of the curriculum, so the grading is must. One must evaluate whether the learner is moving in the right direction or not, whether the teacher is doing justice with his job of imparting this particular education or not. M. Rahman gives 3 major components that constitute the concept of evaluation and testing. In L2 teaching, structure gets focused as main content. In L1 teaching, meaning gets the main focus, and in the area of education, the traits of personality. What is the method? Method is the means or manner of procedure, especially a regular and systematic way of accomplishing something. In other words, it refers to the plans or procedures followed to accomplish a task or attain a goal. In testing, it refers to the procedure to be followed according to a definite, established, logical or systematic plan. So what is the purpose behind it? In the field of testing, it is defined as the reason for which something exists. It is synonymously used to represent the terms goal, aim, or objective. Goal refers to a very broad and ultimate category, while aim to a more specific set of purposes, and objective as the most precisely defined ends which can be described in terms of behavioral outcomes in the field of education. So this way, aims are supposed to be discussed. Aims of this module of language testing are to be able to discuss uses of language test for different purposes and context, to develop basic competence in writing classroom tests and evaluating published tests, to become familiar at a basic level with the concerns of professional test writers, to become aware of issues related to second language assessments such as reliability, validity, fairness, etc. To be able to identify different types of tests, both teacher prepared and standardized, and various types of test items. Be able to design different testing exercises to measure students' learning and competence. To use testing terminology to describe test elements. And to be able to distinguish between well and poorly written test items. Now, what are the types of evaluation and testing? Before we discuss it, let me quote M. Scriven in 1967 in his work said, the methodology of evaluation, he first distinguished between formative and summative evaluation. These are the two types, formative evaluation and summative evaluation. And he just differentiated between these two types. Formative evaluation is done to gather feedback that can be used by the instructor or the learners to guide improvements in the ongoing teaching and learning process. For example, classroom interaction, question answer sessions, discussions, etc. On the other hand, summative evaluation is employed to assess the level of success or proficiency obtained at the end of an instructional unit by comparing it with some benchmark. For example, like examinations or tests, the annual, half-yearly or semester system, whatever it may be. Tests can also be classified into objective and subjective types. Objective test includes multiple choice, questions, true and false, closed test, fill in the blanks. These are the types in which you can set your paper. Subjective test, on the other hand, test the student's ability, that is the narrative ability, critical ability, analytical ability, how short notes, essays and question answers, long question answers, he can just develop according to his capability. Test is also categorized as per the objective for which it is being prepared, like placement test, aptitude test, proficiency test, admission test, diagnostic test, etc. Language tests assess the student's language skills and can be distinguished on the basis of its design and purpose. Based on design, the test can either be in the form of grammatical exercises, reading comprehensions, vocabulary, etc. It may be a performance test that assesses the student's performance or performative ability. Based on purpose, test can be either an achievement test or the proficiency test. Then evaluation, when it is done properly, focuses on grades and may also reflect classroom component other than course content and level of efficiency or skill. It can include discussion, cooperation, verbal ability, etc. Assessment, on the other hand, is a process of gathering information that will help in evaluating the examinee. Testing is a more specific instrument employed to assess the student's performance, like specific tests are used with a specific objective depending on the skill or ability that is to be tested. Now, how do we come to know whether this testing process that is being done is good or not? Are we satisfied with it, or there should be some improvement? For this, characteristics of a good test is very important to understand. A good test can be created keeping in mind the objective of the course or module for which it has been made. The teacher has to determine the objectives of the test as well as prepare and plan in advance. Language test assess the students' language skills and comprehension from their performance, how they are just using the writing skills in their answer book, how they are answering and just exhibiting their spoken skills, how well they are reading and comprehending, and how effective listener they are. As per M. Rahman, there are three main stages of preparation of a test. Number one is planning, then composition, and then analysis. Planning covers outlining test, listing of topics, casting of ideas for items and material collection. The second step, composition, includes the composition of actual items and choice for objectivity. While the third part, analysis, consists of determining difficulties and discrimination of test items. Three vital features of good test are considered well by various researchers: reliability, validity, and practicality. Every test should be reliable, because by testing and by giving grades, by evaluating the performance of the student, whatever you are going to give as answer is going to decide his whole career, is going to affect his psychological makeup, is going to affect his whole being. So reliability is very important. The test should be reliable and generate similar results under the same testing conditions. In other words, it should be consistent. It should be valid. Why? Because it fulfills the desired outcome and provide meaningful information. The test should be practical, because it should be economical and manageable in time. Suppose the testing time paper is of 2 hours. So the matter given, the questions given should be such that is humanly possible to answer within that given time. So it should be considered in mind whether the time given is 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour, whatever it is. So number of questions should be dependent upon the time itself, and the difficulty of the questions, the grading of the question should be such. In order for the test to be reliable, valid and practical, it is necessary that one should decide the objective of the test, like why and for what purpose the test is being taken, maintain consistency and use appropriate testing methods. Suppose that if you want to use the fluency of the learner, then you will have to take a speaking test. If you want to just test the grammatical confidence of the child, then you will have to take written communication as well as the spoken one. So this is the way that, keeping all these things in mind, you are supposed to just judge that what should be the best method, best test for that particular child. One should avoid ambiguous questions and confusing directions. Questions that can be interpreted in more than one way and thus give rise to confusion should not be there. It should maintain clarity. Instructions should be crystal clear. Employ simple and precise language. If the language in the question itself is confusing, the words are such that are above the level of the students, then they are not going to do justice with the level of the examinee. The student should understand the instructions clearly, because there will be no one to explain that whatever you have in your mind while framing the questions. In MCQ, multiple choice questions, provide good distractors and one clear answer. Avoid clues. So this is the way you should keep in mind while framing the test, while just choosing the final test paper for evaluating the performance of these students. But what is the importance of testing and evaluation? Again, the same thing. It is finding out about students' strengths and weaknesses. It is about determining learning styles that would be more effective for students. And it is about learning about students' inclination and interest. It is said that a teacher is a researcher at the same time. When he teaches, he is not only teaching, he is rather doing a research work. How? Because the way he is teaching, the problem he is encountering, the solution he is designing, this is all research. And on the basis of it, he just further proceeds to give a better atmosphere and a better learning strategies, or he may change the strategy. So this is all upon, it depends upon the teacher concerned, who is the researcher himself at that particular point. Classifying students into different levels, they can be divided into groups as per their learning. They may be classified as per their abilities or as per their interest, characteristics, even as per their achievements. Monitoring and following the progress of individual students is required. Providing feedback about a student's achievement gives them further strength or just motivation to do better. Specifying suitable teaching materials and activities is the duty of the teacher. Discovering what students have learned and what they still need to learn can be decided only after some tests. Deciding what to teach next also somehow related with this particular performance. Determining how to adapt lesson content to student need and learning styles. Evaluating the effectiveness of teaching methods and assigning grades and feedback to students can be done through evaluation and testing only. Teachers are of the view that feedback should be given to parents as well, because in the learning process, if at one end there stands teacher, in the middle student, and on the other hand parent, because most of the time parent, they live with the students. So if teacher teaches something, gives them something for practice, so then that part is there, the responsibility of the parents. So feedback should go to parents. Giving feedback to other teachers in the school and the principal is also required, because shaping the child is not only the job of one teacher. So many teachers are teaching that particular child, and principal is designing and just arranging things accordingly, so they must also have that particular feedback. Communicating with other professionals to provide more effective courses and revising previous lesson content is also required. Often when we talk about testing, then we come across one phrase, that is communicative language testing. What is it? We all know that language is for communication. Then what we are going to do with this communicative language testing? As described by Spolsky, that the history of language testing could be divided into three distinctive periods: the pre-scientific period, the psychometric structuralist period, and the psycholinguistic sociolinguistic period. Now, Morrow is a great researcher in the field who translated these periods into the Garden of Eden, the Vale of Tears, and the Promised Land. The Promised Land was advent of communicative language testing, as Morrow said, at the end of the 1970s and the early 1980s. But what was communicative language testing? The approach was primarily a rejection of the role that reliability and validity had come to play in language testing. Early communicative language testers, they latched onto Davies's argument that there was a tension between reliability and validity, and designed validity as the parallelism of real-world activities and test tasks. This means that validity involved making the test truer to an activity, that would take place in the real world. Yet, reliability could only be increased through using objective item types like multiple choice. As Underhill in 1982 argued, I quote, "There is no real life situation in which we go around asking or answering multiple choice questions," unquote. Thus, the more validity a test had, the less reliability it had, and vice versa. Isn't it true? Ever it happens that we go somewhere or ask something and give them 4 choices, or somebody gives us 4 choices for any question? No, it's not. So if you want to have the test a lifelike situation, then this MCQ is not approved by these researchers. It has long been asserted in a wide range of contexts that tests exert a powerful influence on language learners who are preparing to take these exams and on the teachers who try to help them prepare. The following statements are typical of claims in the literature. Number 1, that it is generally accepted that public examinations influence the attitudes, behavior, and motivation of teachers, learners, and parents, said by Pearson. How? I can just explain this point, that whatever test, the type of test you are preparing, it is just going to affect the attitude and behavior, because the way these teachers will prepare the student for the test depends upon the quality of the test. Whether parent wants to send his child to particular test or not depends upon the quality and the standard of the test. Teachers are motivated enough to prepare students for that particular test or not. So there are various things, that course is set and test is according to the course, or the test is there and course is being modified according to the test, or the teaching style is being modified according to the test. There are 2 different things. Sometimes, rather most of the times, we find that in colleges the teaching is examination oriented. What is important for exams this year? That is the thrust area for both teachers and the learners. They just guess, and accordingly, this is more important, this is less important, this is not at all important, this came last year, so it can be avoided, isn't it? Think. It is common to claim the existence of washback. Washback. Have you ever heard this thing? Washback. This is important as far as language testing is concerned. It is the impact of a test on teaching. And to declare that test can be powerful determiners both positively and negatively of what happens in classrooms, said by Wall and Alderson. The washback effects of large-scale testing programs on instructions are widely discussed by them. In the view of instructors and students, such tests contain what students must learn and therefore what must be taught, a reasonable view given that the test in many cases represent the language hurdle students must clear before continuing their academic careers. Let us discuss more this particular word, washback. Swain in 1985 states the prevailing opinion. He said, "It has frequently been noted that teachers will teach to a test, that is, if they know the content of a test and or the format of a test, they will teach their students accordingly." Unquote. Tests are often perceived as exerting a conservative force which impedes progress. As Andrews and Fulialov point out, not only have many tests failed to change, but they have continued to exert a powerful negative washback effect on teaching. Unquote. These authors also note that educationalists often decry the negative washback effects of examinations and regard washback as an impediment to educational reform or progressive innovations in school. It's true that teachers teach to an examination. National officials have three choices with regard to this backwash effect. They can fight it, they can ignore it, or they can use it. So, language testing and evaluation is an important and integral part of language teaching. It can be termed as a crucial and determining factor of the decision-making process. The information gathered through test and through evaluation provides important clues as to the changes that need to be brought into the curriculum or the teaching methods or the style of the teachers. It is important to get the desired outcome. Planning, designing, and preparing a test are thus crucial parts of this teaching learning process. They are a prominent part of course design and plan, for they provide direction to future plans and course of action to be undertaken. It is of prime importance for the language teacher to be familiar with the process, because testing and evaluation in language teaching, unlike other subjects, is both skill and content based. Comprehension as well as proficiency in performance of the language skills. To conclude, we can just say that when a person, a syllabus designer, sits to design the syllabus, at that time he keeps in mind how this syllabus is going to be evaluated. He puts into units. He just decides the marks at that very time. So, process of language testing and evaluation starts from there. When it comes to the procedural part, when the teacher is there in the classroom, he also discusses the important or unimportant topics according to the marks or the evaluation process. In the same way, a student also gives importance, because this process, this chapter is of 20 marks, or this chapter is of 10 marks, or I will be graded accordingly, that it is going to the objective type, so I am going to study in this way. It is going to be subjective type, so my preparation for this exam will be of different type. So this way, evaluation and testing affects all the parameters of education level and in a deep way. So, happy learning, and thank you for visiting EPG Pathshala.